If you clicked on this video, you're probably already on your way to becoming more aware of what's happening in our world. And in today's video, I'm going to further deepen your knowledge. I'm going to tell you how social media impacts your life and how you can prevent certain measures from taking place in your life. Of course, we need to get a little bit of background and context before we get into the main point of this video, since it is important to know where social media started. It will be very short, I promise. Mass media is basically the way through which the people at the top talk to us ordinary people. And it came about in the 15th century when a guy called Johannes Gutenberg used the printing press to print the first books. Mass media, however, isn't only represented by books. It can also be represented by the radio, by videography, by the cinema, and the most important one, by the internet. Now that we've finished with the background, we've reached the point where a problem has arisen. Remember when I said earlier that mass media is a way for the people at the top to talk to us ordinary people? Well, if you use your brain, you know that this is a recipe for disaster. That is because the elites employ a tactic which is best described as shaping the truth in order to fit their agenda. In other words, lying. There are a couple of ways through which the elites lie to you, and if you're not especially looking for them, you probably won't find them. The first strategy they use is called agenda setting, where the government keeps repeating the same praise, the same idea over and over again until it is drilled into your skull and you start accepting it. The best example for this is the US war on terror, where for 20 years the US government manipulated US kids in order to tell them that the Middle Eastern people are bad guys and that they need to invade Iraq. This plays on the human behavior where we tend to accept something the more it is repeated, even though it doesn't become any more real. The second strategy they use is framing, which is basically described as cherry-picking information in order to only show one view so that there can be no critical thought due to the fact that there are no second options, there are no criticism involved. This is also where they use incorrect statistics in order to portray a gap which is bigger than it actually is. They may do this by starting a scale from something that's not zero, so that the gap looks bigger than it actually is in reality. The last thing I want to talk about is the spiral of silence, which is a study that concluded that people who find themselves in the minority are less likely to speak out. Therefore, other people that also shame their opinion will not speak out either, and this result will amplify the problems at the point previously mentioned. Now, let me ask you this: why do the elites do this? Well, there are many of reasons, but they can be boiled down to two main ones: greed and power. The first reason why they lie to you is to make you follow their agenda or opinion in order to make you more likely to vote for them in an election, and you will basically become a fan of theirs. This mostly applies to politicians, of course. The second reason why they lie to you is to suck as much money out of you as possible. This is mostly employed by companies who want you to click on their website, which make exaggerated claims or headlines, so that you can be plastered with ads or buy a useless product that you don't need. The second problem which I want to address in today's video is how these problems actually take a toll on your mental health, because of course they do. The first thing mass media affects is your cognitive ability, which is described as your brain taking the information from the internet, from everywhere, and it will start to apply it in your head and apply it to pattern recognition, and then it will start to apply it to your life, which is good if you're learning something useful. However, if you're being fed misinformation, then it will absolutely hurt your development. The second way your brain is affected is through your beliefs, meaning that if a government or someone repeatedly says something or presents to you a stance which you find interesting or an event you've never heard before, you will tend to follow that opinion, even if you have never heard about the event before. The last four, psychology, effect, behaviors, and attitudes, can be summed up into one sentence: fake news play with your head and triggers emotions and unwanted behaviors. The last things I want to talk about are desensitization, and the third person effect. Desensitization is basically when you get repeated the same stuff over and over again until your brain just kind of skips it and it stops paying attention to it, or it doesn't have that much effect anymore. Applying this to the current topic means that if you get fed enough fake news, you will essentially just accept them, and you will be less likely to critique them because you don't really care that much anymore about them, because they are basically everywhere. The third party effect implies that a person is more likely to think about themselves as less susceptible to these methods of manipulation rather than other people, when in reality they are just as susceptible. Every time you fall for one of these fake news, you are basically going down a pit, and your brain tells itself that it's worse to admit that you've been tricked now than before. So it just becomes harder to come out. Now that I've outlined the problems, it's time for me to tell you some of the solutions. Two of the solutions, actually. The first one is called digital detox, and it works by regulating or entirely removing your electronics from your use. This is mostly becoming the trend in 2025 because people are tired of having electronics run their life and of content that's bad rotting their brains. The second solution is fact checking your information, and I will shortly explain to you how you can do that. You can fact check your information by verifying if the people who wrote it is reputable and actually exists as a real person, if they got the sources right from the reference, if the headline is not exaggerated, and you should also use your critical thinking skills in order to judge whether the written content is actually good for you or not. I would love to have an imagination exercise with you all in order to imagine how a world without these measures against social media would look like. And for that, I've set up an example which is based on the book Fahrenheit 451. If you haven't read the book already, it's about a dude going around and burning books because that's what the government told him. The world of Fahrenheit 451 is characterized by a lot of screens and surveillance, so that people are less likely to do something that use their brain in order to actually stimulate their critical thinking, because that means they may rebel against the government, which is something not good. In order to exemplify this, Montag's house, which by the way is the dude's name, is plastered with screens on on three walls of his house in a room, which are continuously running in order to entertain his wife, which he doesn't even love. This book may be a bit of an exaggeration of what can actually be happening. However, it is a good imagination exercise to think about what could be happening if we don't take measures in the first place, since people at the top will not stop bugging us about it. You can prevent this carnage, this dystopia, this hellhole by applying some of the solutions that I mentioned earlier. There are a lot more things that you can do, but I will not go into them right now. So all told, this is everything I've got for today. If you like this content, make sure to like and subscribe since I will post more of it. Have a good day.